can't be the only one who's noticed. Anytime the government seems to engage in overreach, we start hearing comparisons to this guy. With all the Supreme Court decisions that have come down recently, there are a lot of comparisons being made between what's happening in the US right now with Project 2025 to what happened in Germany in the 1930s. And I've been asking the question lately, could these comparisons possibly be accurate? Now, my undergrad degree is actually in international business and German studies, so when people make comparisons like this, I cringe a little bit because it's just so easy to throw comparisons like that out there for shock value.
If Project 2025 is the GOP's version of Mein Kampf.
But is that really where we are now? Is this 1930s Germany? I'm Dara Star Tucker, and this is The Breakdown. Now, the algorithm is probably going to tear me up for this video, so I'm going to try to avoid using this guy's last name for what it's worth. So firstly, is Project 2025 the US's version of Mein Kampf? Well, let's take a look at what was going on in Germany at that time. In 1923, Adolf was the leader of a very small party called the National Socialist German Workers' Party. They weren't really socialist at all. They were actually fascists, which is a right-wing party, and they hated socialists, who were left-wing, as were communists, who the Nazis also hated. And by the way, the term Nazi was actually a slur that they didn't like very much. Now, there was a lot of economic instability in Germany in the wake of World War I, so Adolf here figured that he could capitalize on that and completely disrupt the democratic process in Germany and take power by force. So he and his followers initiated an uprising in 1923, and they tried to take over a bunch of public buildings in Munich. Oh my God, Editor Dara here. Wrong footage. I'm so sorry. How embarrassing. Okay, let's get back to the story. But the German police and army stopped them. Adolf ended up being sentenced to prison for this, where he wrote his famous book, Mein Kampf, in 1924. Now, since so many people have speculated about this, it's important to ask, are there really similarities between Adolf's manifesto, Mein Kampf, and Project 2025? Well, Project 2025 is kind of comfy. It is. But it's also important to remember that the average person hasn't read either of those documents, and hyperbolic statements like Project 2025 is the Republicans' Mein Kampf can send people into a frenzy because they don't really know what that means. They just know it's not good. And evoking that sort of nebulous evil can very much fall into the category of fear-mongering. You're dangling something in front of people that they don't fully understand, and that's the point. The fear is the point, not the facts, and that's unhelpful. Now, that doesn't mean that there aren't some very concerning parallels between Project 2025 and Mein Kampf. There are. Now, to be clear, Mein Kampf was mostly about how much Adolf hated the Jews or anyone who wasn't Aryan, and how he felt they should be eliminated from society altogether. Project 2025 doesn't explicitly express any of those views about any particular group of people, but the Project 2025 manifesto, like Trump's stated anti-immigration policies outlined in his Agenda 47, clearly aims to reduce the number of brown people in the US as much as possible.
We're going to do an executive order day one, ending automatic citizenship for children of illegal aliens.
Talk of mass deportations, detention centers, travel bans, and ending birthright citizenship is highly reminiscent of Mein Kampf's recommendations to clear German society of all so-called undesirables. Another legit comparison that you can make between these two documents is to one of the founding tenets of Nazism, something called the Führerprinzip, or the leader principle, and it had to do with expanding executive authority in government. They called Adolf the Führer, or the leader, and his word was to be supreme above all written laws, policies, and doctrines. He believed that dictatorship was the most efficient form of government. It was deeply anti-democratic. Mein Kampf really established the parameters of a fascist dictatorship in which the leader of the country enjoyed unquestioned authority. In the same way, the framers of Project 2025 aim to create a government in which executive powers, or the powers that are given to the president, are expanded to unprecedented proportions. They aim to greatly reduce what they call the administrative state, which involves gutting or eliminating pretty much any governmental organization that was established to protect citizens or regulate business. The recent Chevron deference decision by the Supreme Court greatly increases the chances that they'll be able to do just that. There's also a lot of concerning language in Project 2025 regarding leftist thought. The document seeks to remove anything that it deems woke ideology from every level of government and really society in general. That includes diversity programs, business regulations, labor protections, LGBTQ rights, societal protections like the Affordable Care Act and Social Security, and they want to do away with reproductive rights. It talks about cracking down on protesters, academics, and the arts. And every single program in the group that I just mentioned was targeted by the Nazis. In short, Project 2025, if fully enacted, would establish the United States as a far right-wing, nationalist, authoritarian state. And that's exactly what Adolf and his cronies were attempting to do, with a little zhuzh. Let's not forget that Adolf was also attempting to establish Germany's Third Reich, or Third Empire, to restore the German motherland back to its former glory. The conquest and annexation of foreign lands was central to what Mein Kampf was advocating for, and there are no such aspirations included in the Project 2025 manifesto. We got all of that out of the way about 100 years ago. But there's nothing in there about annexing Mexico or Canada, for what it's worth. And it's also important to note that Adolf's idea of what it meant to be German was also deeply based in eugenics. There was a lot of talk of racial hygiene and blood quantum and hereditary health. And they didn't just target Jews and other ethnic minorities. They sterilized and even euthanized the mentally and physically disabled. There's none of that kind of language in Project 2025. So are we living in an era that echoes the changes that were happening as the Nazis were coming to power? With a few important exceptions, I think it would be hard to argue that we're not. If the folks behind Project 2025 and Agenda 47 get their way, comparisons to Germany in 1925 and the United States in 2025 won't be that far off. I'm Doris Starr Tucker. If you enjoyed the breakdown, join me on Patreon at the link in my bio to support my work.